Yeah, Mr. President, I think it's something that may be coming up. It's worth addressing right now and addressing early. It's been a concern, a bipartisan concern for a long period of time. And that is that President Biden has made it clear that he intends to re-enter the 2015 Iran deal, better known as the JCPOA. Now, this was something that disturbed a lot of people, a lot of Democrats as well as Republicans back during the Obama years. And I want to get on record here to make sure that re-entering that Iran deal would be a terrible mistake, and the administration would face stiff opposition in Congress if he tries to go that route. There are things that we can do, but not re-entering that one. There could be no return to a deal whose limitations on Iran's nuclear program begin to expire in 4 years, or that return to a deal that ultimately allows Iran to enrich enough uranium for a nuclear weapon after those limitations. Just keep in mind, Iran, that's the country that is right in the middle of all the terrorist activity, promoting terrorism around the world, and to even think about allowing them to keep some kind of a nuclear capability that could be used as a bomb would just not, it's just unthinkable that that could happen. And we couldn't return to a deal that lifts the sanctions on a government that is leading the state's sponsor of terrorism, targeting United States personnel and partners across the Middle East. You don't need to take my word for it, because my Democrat colleagues warned the Obama administration in 2015. I was here, I remember when it happened. They talked about the deals, the shortcomings of that deal. One was the senior senator from New York, the current majority leader, Chuck Schumer, who warned that under the Iran deal, and this is a quote, he said, "Inspections are not anywhere, anytime. The 24-day delay before we can inspect is troubling." Well, that would be right. Essentially what that said at that time was they can do anything they want to do for 24 days before we restrict anything that they're doing. He was right. He further said that delay would enable Iran to escape detection of any illicit building and improving of possible military dimensions, the tools that go into building a bomb but don't emit radioactivity. That door was left wide open. That could take place. Or listen to the Democrat colleague from New Jersey, Senator Menendez. He's the new chairman of the Senate Foreign Relations Committee, and he warned that the deal met, and the quote that he said was, "We are now embarking not on preventing nuclear proliferation, but on managing or containing it, which leaves us with a far less desirable, less secure, and less certain world order." Or listen to my Democrat colleague from West Virginia, Senator Manchin. He serves with me on the committee that I chaired for quite some time, the Senate Armed Services Committee. And he warned us, and this is his quote, he said, "Lifting sanctions without ensuring that Iran's sponsorship of terrorism is neutralized is dangerous to regional and American security." I mean, these are no-brainers. These are things that Democrats and Republicans alike were warning us about, the frailties that were in that proposal back in 2015. Now, my Democrat colleagues were pretty prophetic in what they were warning. They were warning in three things. First of all, we still, after this period of time, do not know the full scope of Iran's nuclear program. Secondly, Iran's nuclear production slowed, but it did not end after that. And third, Iran did, in fact, use its sanctions relief to fund terrorism, and it continues to support groups that target Americans for murder. And I just wish then that Vice President Biden had listened to my Democrat colleagues and their warning about the Iran deal shortcomings then, and I hope that he'll listen now that he is president. There it's more significant. And there's simply no good argument for returning to a bad deal. Too often, supporters of the Iran deal have accused the Iran deal's critics, talking of me and others, I'm sure, of being opposed to any deal at all. Back in 2015, the Obama administration depicted the opponents of the Iran deal as warmongers. And let me just be clear, nobody wants war with Iran. And if anything, I believe the Obama-era deal makes war more likely by enriching one of the worst state sponsors of terrorism and by giving it a clear pathway towards a nuclear weapons capabilities. I'm not making this stuff up. This is serious. Calling the people who oppose them warmongers couldn't be further from the truth. In fact, killing the Iran's arch terrorist, Soleimani, last year, President Trump explicitly called for a deal that makes the world safer and more peaceful. He was calling for that at that time. So we don't want war, but we also don't want the flawed Iran deal. That terrible deal isn't and never has been the only choice, but we would absolutely consider supporting a good deal. And what would a good deal look like? And I want to highlight 4 main principles that we would look for. And this is something that the president can do now. First, the deal has got to be comprehensive. That means addressing all of Iran's bad behavior, its funding of terrorism, terrorist proxies, its ballistic missile program, its nuclear program, the things my Democrat colleagues were worried about back in 2015. Secondly, the deal has got to be inclusive of the views of Israel and our Arab partners. The Obama administration sidestepped their concerns, and President Biden should not do that the same now. We should have learned from that. Third, the deal must be permanent. The 2015 deal allowed for a sunset provision that would ultimately allow Iran to possess a nuclear weapons capability. And I'll be clear, Iran should never be allowed to have a nuclear capability. Fourth, the deal's got to be transparent. It's got to allow for regular and unconditional inspections of Iran's nuclear program, just as the majority leader called for 6 years ago. I mean, what's wrong with making sure that we are allowed to make inspections to make sure that they are doing what they've agreed to do? And there's nothing wrong with it. Now, these are things my colleagues and I agree on. President Biden can find bipartisan support here. To repeat, we want a diplomatic resolution, not war, but that means a good resolution. Of course, it's far from clear that the Iranian regime is ready and willing to engage in serious negotiations. So I call on the Biden administration to lay the groundwork now so that a new deal has the foundation to success and when the Iranian regime is ready. You know, and that's a logical thing that I think would encompass a lot of support from the Republican side and support from the House. Specifically, this means maintaining our leverage with Iran through sanctions and a strong U.S. military posture in the region. It also means opening discussions with our European allies and our other regional partners to coordinate priorities for the new deal. Most importantly, it means working with Congress early and often so that there is a sustainable bipartisan path forward when the time is right. Along those lines, I was disappointed by President Biden's decision to appoint someone who negotiated the Iran deal as his new Iran envoy. A new deal requires new thinking. Bipartisan cooperation won't be achieved by elevating the partisans of the past. If something didn't work back then, let's try somebody else, soon new personnel working on these problems. Moving forward, the Biden administration should expect difficult confirmations for any nominee who was involved in negotiating that deal back in 2015. President Biden has an opportunity to correct the Obama administration's mistakes on Iran. It has a chance to build bipartisan congressional support for a diplomatic resolution that is truly comprehensive, inclusive, transparent, and permanent. A successful Iran deal allows the U.S. to focus more squarely on challenges of Russia and China. A return to the Iran deal, however, will empower the Iranian regime and keep us mired in the region. I think everyone knows Iran. It's the world leader in terrorism. and we should do everything we can to make sure that they don't get a nuclear capability to develop a nuclear weapon. I can't imagine that anyone could argue with that. With that, I will yield the floor and suggest the absence of a quorum.
Clerk will call the roll.